Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss how the world's politicians are trying to put lipstick on a pig by claiming COP26 successors when its single core aim has been failed and failed badly. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I'm going to have to start off with something that actually really shocks me. And our own ministerial president for COP26, Alex Sharma, seemed to be the only world leader involved in this mess at COP26. Not all world leaders were involved in the mess. That I think I've seen apologise. We're so used to conservatives around the world ducking for cover and blaming everyone else for their mess or denying that the mess even exists. Before the event had even begun, you knew it was going to be a dud. Boris Johnson, king of optimism, was deflating expectations from the very beginning. This is a man who spoke enthusiastically about how great Brexit was going to be and what an opportunity COVID was. A man who can be optimistic about those things should easily be able to hype up an environmental conference, but a lot will have been discussed behind the scenes before world leaders ever gathered in Glasgow. In addition, it was not the purpose of the conference to come up with ways to improve the situation. If it were, it would have been easy to hype up expectations and then claim victory at the end. After all, things have been agreed. You could claim that as a victory. But the core aim was very specific. The core aim was putting in place measures that would keep us to no more than a rise of 1.5 degrees in temperature. We also knew what some of those measures had to include. And it absolutely meant phasing out the use of fossil fuels bloody quickly. This has not occurred. In fact, it was clear last week that it was not going to achieve that aim, but some things were being agreed. Then at the 11th hour, it got worse as India and China watered down some measures related to the use of coal. Essentially, the agreement acknowledges that yes, carbon emissions need to be cut, absolutely. But they put off any commitment to actually cut them until the future, like next year at least. And Alex Sharma said, and I quote, "I apologise for the way this process has unfolded, and I am deeply sorry." And as he continued to speak, he was visibly moved to tears. Now, you can argue, generally speaking, apologies are just words. But at the same time, they are words that are not spoken by members of this Boris Johnson-led Tory government. They never say sorry. But it was clear that he felt the impact of what he was saying as well. I'll post a link to an article with the footage. It's worth a watch. Now, it doesn't make it all right. And I also don't want to lay the blame for this failure at the feet of just our government. Other governments fail to take it seriously as well. That being said, our own has not led the way. We are about to open 2 new coal mines in the country. I thought it was done and dusted. I grew up in a mining village in the 80s. Coal's done, finished. Why are we bringing it back? Boris Johnson has held meetings with oil companies and refused to say what was discussed. The government failed to prevent water companies filling our rivers and coastline with our own effluents. Johnson was also savaged by other world leaders over his cut to international aid in the run-up to this conference. International aid is an absolute prerequisite of decarbonising the world. The climate emergency does not recognise national borders, and so neither can our solutions mess about with them. Sharma himself is not blameless, having put in a lot of air miles over the past year against even COVID restrictions. But if we have to find some semblance of humanity at the event, then the only evidence I saw actually came from Sharma. That's what surprised the hell out of me, that of any leader of the most powerful economies in the world, it was a member of my government that showed any understanding of just how much they'd failed humanity this month. The largest economy to condemn the failure that I saw was from Switzerland, but from G7 nations, all we got were variations on the theme of, well, we achieved something. Like giving a raincoat to a man about to be shot to protect them. There is an element of binary about this. If the aim was to prevent us going over that tipping point, then we either did enough or we did not do enough. We did not do enough. Biden is about to flog 80 million acres in the Gulf of Mexico to oil companies. Russia and China were largely absent from the event altogether. They sent representatives, but not their own leaders. The most important countries for this process are still being run according to corrupt corporate interests. You know, you could sort of see it was going to be a blowout from the start, couldn't you? Not just because the ever-optimistic Johnson was sounding a note of pessimism, but because there was a row as it was building up. There was a row from sponsors about the organisation. Sorry, what was that? Sponsors. Why would you even have a huge international conference that is designed to do nothing less than save humanity have sponsorship? Couldn't the world leaders club together to pay for their own conference hall and hotels? I mean, I still find it hard to accept the notion of even needing to be physically meeting during a global pandemic. We've got teleconferencing facilities. Now, I know I'm very introverted, and extroverts and introverts work very differently, but this idea of needing to physically meet is a nonsense for me. But Phil, sometimes you just need that personal touch. Think about what you're saying. The fate of humanity lay in having the right leaders at the right time who all had the right chemistry to actually make something happen in unity. Is that what we were supposed to believe? If so, we absolutely did not have the right leaders for this or any other time. About the best thing to come out of the event from a British point of view was Labour committing to support discussions on an international law to make it a new criminal offence of ecocide, basically placing a legal responsibility on people to look after our environment. I mean, can you imagine that if you think about it? We have domestic and international laws around so many things that are essential in order for people to live in relative harmony with each other. That is the purpose of law, to allow people to just live, but not a thing to preserve the very environment that we all need to live as a species. That's a bit grim. The most hopeful announcement for me was that a possible future UK government would support action that even then would still need other countries to provide future governments that take these matters seriously. And the problem is that we already know from history that governments will not take the issue sufficiently seriously until their public do. And the public won't until it's too late, because they are constantly being distracted by a media that smudges these issues out of either ignorance or greed. You know, I grew up at a time in the 80s when the media would try and cast doubt on the very concept of anthropogenic climate change. It's like, oh, some scientists don't even think it exists. No, they don't. Not because the science is more sure, it was always, throughout my entire life, but because the public are more sure. Real consequences had transcended from warnings to actual occurrences. If this dismal event in Glasgow is anything to go by, it might well be that climate action will always be firefighting against the consequences of what has long been warned about. Another thing that happened in the 80s, those who were around at the time will remember, the hole in the ozone layer. Oh, we acted bloody quickly to sort that one out, didn't we? Because that was a serious consequence. Had to do something. Problem is that we don't do anything when it's oh, this will happen in 10 or 20 years' time. Someone else will be in charge then, leave it to them. But there it is. Everyone failed. Sure, some major economies are taking actions themselves. I get that, but it needs everyone. You know, for my own government, we have a formal trade policy of trading less with our immediate neighbours and more with Asian countries around the Pacific, with the huge carbon cost that brings. We also have an agricultural policy of getting ready to import large quantities of intensively farmed meat, which has a much larger carbon footprint than our own farming methods. We continue to subsidise fossil fuel companies where they should get nothing, and fail to adequately subsidise low carbon energy where our government should be doing everything it can. But we are not alone in wringing our hands and saying that something must be done, but there are too many difficulties. Others are doing the same. Frankly, if a head of government of any nation ever says that it's too difficult to literally preserve the future of mankind, they should be made to step down and make way for someone who knows what they're doing. It's just too important. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.